Yeah, I mean, the question I was gonna ask that you knew that I was gonna ask is, like, can you still respect someone if their values are completely different from yours?
It depends on the values that we're talking about in terms of like, I think it's, the agree to disagree or, hey, like we can have a difference of opinions or a difference of values and stuff. That's totally fine. If we're talking about the fact that, like, hey, I value creativity and you value like financial security, right? Like, those are different things. And that's fine. Like, we can agree to disagree. Like, let's have different approaches to things, whatever. But if we're talking about like the values of treating people as humans, if we're talking about the values of like, hey, we're all here sharing this planet, like nobody's actually in charge. I don't know that there's room to like disagree on those. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Soul Snacks. Um, Things feel heavy right now. And there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of opinions, and sometimes it can be overwhelming trying to figure out like where we stand on things. So today we wanted to take a minute and slow that down a little bit. Um, it's kind of easy to talk about values when life feels calm, but when things feel a little bit uncertain or chaotic, like what is it that we actually fall back on? So this whole conversation is not about being right or talking about politics or anything like that, but it is about getting honest with ourselves, what we believe, what where that comes from, and whether we're really living by those values, staying aligned with them, because at the end of the day, they're our compass, right? They're how we operate and move through the world. So today we're going to dive into what we stand for, where we struggle with things and how we stay grounded when the world feels a bit loud and a bit chaotic. So,
Which it definitely does right now, right?
yeah, right, right. So, Cami, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm pretty good. It's been a hectic week so far. There is a lot going on in the news. And like you said, I think there's a lot of heaviness in the
Hmm.
world right now. A lot of people are distracted and concerned about the state of the state, what's
Yeah,
happening,
everything. Yeah,
everything that's happening. So, this conversation I think will resonate with a lot of people today.
yeah. I think I hope so. And when before Cami and I hit record, we were just talking about how like our hope with this sort of episode is that it does just, well, that to make people know that like these are things that a lot of people are thinking about, talking about. Like, you're not alone if you're trying to figure out this conversation of like, what are my values and where do I stand and how do I actually follow them in this world that we're in, right? And that you can take some of this stuff back and think about your own life and what's showing up for you and that sort of thing. So Cami, I'm gonna kick things off by asking you a question today.
Okay.
So when life feels like chaotic or divided for you, like what anchors you?
Nature.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm like
Did you?
I feel like I should expand this question a little bit, but yeah, yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
I mean, I know, and I know this is a conversation about morals and values.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, like my my walks in nature outside, just getting outside and moving, helps me tremendously with
Mhm.
just getting my thoughts right. Having gaining clarity and things that I'm thinking about. Um, I have very specific core values that I've kind of always have always been important to me in my life, and we'll get into some of that. Um, but it's hard right now because there is so much going on, and I kind of vacillate between. I have a lot of joy in my life and a lot of things to be grateful for, but then I also am nervous and scared and anxious about some of the stuff that's happening in the world. And if I'm not careful, some of those feelings can really pull you down. And so I have to be really cognizant and intentional about kind of grounding myself with the things that I think are most important for me, right? So it's for me it's starts with my family, right? Like just making sure that I'm present for my family. Um being there for my community and my friends. And then, hard work. Like, hard work is one of my core values. And so I can kind of, I think I don't know if it's healthy or not, but a lot of times I can distract myself by kind of diving into work and kind of getting my mind off of the stuff that's happening, that's bothering me. And if I have something different to focus on, then sometimes that will help me kind of get out of any rut if I'm feeling overly anxious or stressed out about some of the stuff that's going on. So, what about you? I mean, what helps you during these times?
Well, okay, I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question before I answer that.
Okay.
Like you said, nature. Nature helps, ground you, and that's a big part of it. Would you say that there's because nature that can be a value, right? Like there is
Mhm.
something that you value about that time, that space, that connection, whatever that is, that ends up being grounding for you because it is so important to you. So if you had to think about a value that would be connected to that, that is part of, your core values and what's important to you, is there like one that you'd put that on?
You mean as far as nature goes?
Yeah.
For me, I have always just found a lot of peace and serenity when I'm in the woods.
Mhm.
I can't really describe why or how.
Mhm.
I think it's just I look around and I see the beauty and I see like all the different things that are surrounding me, and it kind of brings me back to uh knowing that like none of us are in control of anything. And this world is so beautiful. And if we can take a minute to just take a deep breath, look around, find things to be grateful for. I think in some ways that is one of my values, right? Is
Mhm.
just I'm always trying to find the beauty, find the silver lining in the things that might pop up in life. And so in some weird way, I guess that is connected to nature for me.
Mhm. Mhm. That like presence piece,
Mhm.
right? Like the
Yeah, yeah, it just
connection of
it is, it's connection, it ignites all of my senses, right? Like,
Mhm.
my sense of smell and my sense of hearing, and, I can hear the trees kind of rubbing against each other in the wind, I can smell the air and the the water, and just all of the different things that I feel when I'm in the woods just kind
Mhm.
of takes me back to who I am and just really grounds me.
Mhm. Mhm. Hmm,
So,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, and I know you're a big walker too, like, you like to get out and move and you love nature, and,
Yeah.
does that resonate with you as well?
Yeah, so yes, 100%, it does, like, I mean, literally growing flowers and being out I mean, it is a big part of my day to day. I think that I don't remember where I heard it, but, like, within the last couple months, there was this, thought of when it comes to our values. Like, anytime I'd ever looked at values before, it's like, you get this sheet, with all these different values printed on it, or you find these, and there's, 52 different things. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that one resonates, that one resonates, that one resonates, that one resonates, that one, all these things. But I've really tried to narrow it in to maybe, one or two, maybe three values that end up rolling up into just like all the other things roll up into one or two really prominent values, right? So like nature, the natural world, all that like rolls up into one of my values, which is connection.
Mhm.
And connection ends up looking I mean, it covers so many different things, right? But that
Mhm. Yeah.
connection to the natural world, the connection to things outside of myself, the connection to, animals and plants and, nature and the cycles and seasons and everything. It's also connection to people, connection to community, connection to myself, where I'm at. So I think nature is it's a tool and it's a pastime and it's a passion and it's a hobby and it's a love and all these things for me
Mhm.
because it rolls up to that value of
Kinda
connection for me,
Mhm. Yeah, makes total sense.
you
I
know?
feel the same way. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So Okay, do you okay, I'm gonna, transition a little bit here. You said that you have a list of core values.
Mhm.
Like, where do you think they came from? Like, where you know what I mean? Like, where do you have you ever questioned them?
Yeah, sure. Of course. I think you question a lot of things as you grow and go through life's experiences. And I think the majority of my core values were kind of cemented in for me like during my childhood and growing up. We
Mhm,
were a family that used to go camping all the time and hiking in the woods all the time, and we did a lot of stuff outside. My
mhm,
two brothers and I and my mom and dad, and that was a huge part of what we did as a family. There's lessons to be learned in nature. There's lessons to be learned in life and different things that you do. I think one of the things that was established for me at a young age was just the respect for other humans, right?
mm,
And being compassionate and respectful for others. In no matter where you are in life, to try to treat everybody equally, and to just be respectful, right?
mhm,
Um, so I guess, the family piece of it, which is, I mentioned in the beginning, is a big core value of mine, is just like being present for family, being there. Family's everything to me. Um, and so I'm very intentional about my time with my family and caring for my family. Um, but I'm also very intentional about caring for others, like my friends and just other humans in general. Like I try to always give people the benefit of the doubt, regardless of whether our opinions clash or don't clash. I always initially try to start out like just trying to see their perspective, because that's always been big for me. Like, you can have debates and you can argue and you can't agree with people, but um, be respectful and let them have their voice, and then
mhm,
kind of take it from there. But
mhm,
so for me, I would say a big part of it was just the way I grew up, the activities that I did growing up, and then just the experiences I've had along my lifetime in different careers, experiences connecting with other people, good and bad, and
mhm.
just kind of learning and growing from there.
Do you
So,
feel like there's a time in 'cause I think growing up, our families, our peers, like, there's a reason that, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, those adults in our lives are like, "Hey, we're going to instill these values in you," right? Hopefully,
mhm,
like, they're
mhm.
passing this on, like, "This is how we operate as a family. This is what we believe. Here's what we know. Here's what our culture said," like, all that sort of stuff. But then I feel like there's an age at which you're like, okay, well, is that really true for me? Is that what I
Mhm.
actually believe? Is that the thing?" Do you feel like there was a time where you really started to question like, "Oh, is that actually are like
Yeah.
good on my family for passing this along or yeah, good on society-ish for trying to pass this along, but like I'm not actually sure that those are mine anymore." Like, do you remember a time where that started to shift?
Yeah, I do actually. I think because I grew up in a very conservative family, very Republican, most of my family, on my mom's side especially, and my dad's side, Republican values, right? It was kind of just kind of was how we were raised. I think as I started to experience life on my own, I started to have more compassion, for humanity and other things that didn't necessarily align with some of the Republican values. And so I started to kind of carve a path out for myself that felt more authentic to me. And I've had many of heated conversations with family members over, differing of opinions of political figures and things that are happening. But for me, yes, I mean, I would say I've kind of moved into a place where I'm comfortable and I feel more like I'm probably more middle of the road now, probably more left leaning than right. Um, but I still try really hard to see both sides, but sometimes it's really hard, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what about you? I mean, I'm sure that you've well, let me start with, that same question for you. Like, where do you feel like your values came from?
I mean, same, right? I think, growing up, family, those close influences in my life, and also the things that we're taught, like educate. There's a reason that kids are sponges, and the education that we're getting. And
Yeah.
um, I I use the word conditioned, not necessarily in a bad way. But I do think we're conditioned to think certain things and act certain ways and all of that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And some of it
Mhm.
is with the very best of intentions. Some of it is stuff we'll carry with us for our entire lives. And other stuff, to your point, is like, okay, now I'm actually starting to understand myself more. Now I'm starting to, I have all a life of experience of my own versus just taking what other people have learned from their life experience and trying to pass on to me. And I say pass on, like not just my family, but, society and everything else, coworkers, whatever. And so I think as there's like a role that parents, grandparents, elders play in helping to instill the values that are true to the family. And then there comes a time when like it's not it's not their role
Mhm.
anymore. And
Mhm.
I think that just starts to happen in adulthood, honestly. But I do wonder if it'll start to happen at younger ages because of the exposure to information
Mm.
that younger generations have now. Like for us, it may have been happening in like, oh, you get to the 20s or college, or you're like away from home and you start to really think about like, well, gosh, what does this mean for me? Or what does this look like? Or do I really believe that? And then I think that continues on more and more. Like, I feel like I've had more thoughts and conversations around my values and morals in the last probably 5 years than I ever really felt like I had to before. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, but I definitely think that with younger generations, because they have access to information and access to, yes, news and other cultures and the experiences and opportunities, I do wonder if that's starting to shift younger and younger, where people are starting to identify their own values and their own morals earlier on than maybe we did or generations before us did.
Yeah. Yeah, can you think of a time when you started to really question, like, some of the values that you were raised on, and what did that look like for you, and how did that change?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't know that any of the values that I was raised on are different from the values that I have today. Like, I feel very fortunate to have been raised in, on both sides of my family that were very, uh, like human focused,
Mhm.
right? It was always about like other people. It was about helping others. It was about showing up for others. There was a lot of that, which is I still feel like is very much a part of like who I am. That connection piece is very much a part of the dynamics growing up. And when I think about all of my extended family, and like that's a big piece of it. I think the values that really started to shift for me were more around um like fight like money stuff,
Mhm.
more around, and that might even just be like mindset and everything versus like values, if I'm
Mhm.
being honest, you know?
Right.
Um, and this like the like so accountability is probably my biggest value. If I'm being like accountability and connection like rank right up there, but right now accountability feels like it's the strongest one. And that includes accountability to myself, accountability to others, accountability to the things that I've said that I'm going to do, like it runs accountability to the world and to my community. Again, it's like not only do I want to connect to it all, but I being held accountable and showing up is really important. Um and so I think in some ways the values that I started to wonder about were like, well, how am I being accountable to myself? Right? And that I think opened up a whole picture of, okay, well, what are the values that were maybe passed on that I don't necessarily agree with. Not that I completely disagree with them, but that it's like maybe that part isn't actually true. So it opens up a bigger conversation around like what is true. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I just think I think as you go through life, you're faced with so many different experiences and you start to learn what's right for you,
Mhm.
right? So I'm gonna take like your accountability,
Mhm.
because I know you're really big on that particular. Well, I know you're big on connection too, but I'm gonna
Mhm.
take accountability and just I'm gonna throw you a big question here. So I know that's something that you live by.
Mhm.
And it has, that's been a big one for you for as long as I've known you, really.
Mhm.
But what does that look like when you're stressed or you're like if you're triggered or stressed? Like how does that change, if at all?
Um Okay. So there's two different directions I'm going to go with this because one of the reasons that I know it is so important to me is because I get stressed the fuck out when people don't do it.
Mhm.
Like when people are not accountable.
Mhm.
When we don't hold people accountable, when people are not accountable to their own lives, when people like it so I know it's true for me because it's such a big thing. You know what I mean? So there's like that side of it, which I know is not the question that you're asking. But when I share that because I feel like understanding our values, I think when we get stressed or frustrated or when we feel really strongly about something, I think that is a really good gauge to understand what the value is that it's representing in that situation or values as like a got it. This might be something that really means a lot to me that maybe I haven't thought about before, if we're trying to like label what our values look like. But if I try to live by them, and I do, um, and I get stressed or frustrated or triggered or anything, I think there's different responses, right? Like if I'm being honest, the first thought probably goes to why do I feel like I have to always show up in this way? Why do I feel like I have to hold myself to this standard? Why do I feel like I have to there's so many people out there who I don't know what values they're living by. Like, why can't I just be one of those people who doesn't live by their values, right? Who doesn't show up in that way, who doesn't care so much? So I think the first part is this hands up, like I'm just over it, if I'm being honest, you know?
Mhm.
But that lasts for a second. It doesn't, and Mark and I talk about this a lot because we're like, oh, gosh, why do we have to be the type of people who like care so much about everything? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but then the reality is that it's like, no, you know what? I'm gonna show up. And it's almost like a quick like split second change in my brain where it's okay, yeah, is it sometimes frustrating? And yeah, is it annoying? And yeah, do I feel like already stressed or frustrated? But for accountability, it's like I know that at the end of the day, operating that way and following through with that is going to make me feel more grounded. It's going to
Mhm.
make me feel like, hey, I'm showing up and I'm doing the thing and I'm being true to myself in a way that is probably one of the most important ways that we can. Like if we're not living by our values in life, then what good are they? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So, I don't know, what about you? Like when you get stressed, do you feel like, what do you say that you live by where maybe you're like, maybe that's not actually true in the moment? Or how do you help get to your values when you're stressed and frustrated and stuff?
Um, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that, there's things that happen that instantly trigger you or get you
Mhm.
frustrated, right? And that right there is a good indication
Mhm.
that something is going against the grain of your moral compass or
Mhm.
it's something that's really upsetting you for whatever reason. For me, guy could go down a million rabbit holes and things that like
Pick one.
would just light me up, right? Or well, your accountability piece is one of them. Like I can't like laziness for me, like people who are just that they make excuses for all the reasons why they're not having success, but yet they're not doing anything to take action to have success, and they're
Mhm.
just a victim. They're just
Mhm.
it's that victim mentality that just lights me up. Like I just get so frustrated because, and like I think, why can't I just let it go when people are like this, because really, mm, what is it going to matter? Like if Joe Schmo doesn't want to do the work and wants to be a victim and doesn't, isn't doing anything to make himself successful, what is that? What bearing does it have on me, right?
Mhm.
But it still lights me up and it still frustrates me.
Well, and to be fair, really quick, like, it depends on who we're talking about, because for any like random Joe Schmo, whatever, to not be hold their life accountable, like that's one thing. But if it's people in your life that aren't holding themselves accountable to the life that they want to live, and then that ends up impacting you because they're in your close circle or they're in your network, then I think it is okay to have a response. You know what I mean? Or at that point, you get to be like, hey, guess what? If you're choosing not to do any of this, I'm not going to be the person that you're going to be able to come to for the stuff when like it's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I think it depends on the person that just so you feel better about
it
that.
does. Well, it does. But my problem is like it lights me up when it's just Joe Schmo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
You
totally
know
fair.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, that's yeah.
Or
Especially nowadays, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like, come on, man, like step up
Yeah.
to the plate. Like I don't want to hear anymore about your woes and how you're not able to, make any inroads. Well, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
do you expect?
I
Um,
love it. I feel like one of your favorite phrases is like, come on, man. Like the
come
way
on.
you say it.
Come on, man. I know. Well, it's that, and then it's like people who are constantly sick and have ailments
Yeah.
lights me up. It's like, what, you're spending so much time focused on all the things in your body that are wrong with you,
Yeah.
and you're constantly going to the doctor to find out what's wrong, and you're not completely missing all of the amazing things that are right that you should be grateful for, and you just spend your whole life complaining about one ailment after another. It just
Hmm.
it makes me crazy.
Well,
It
yeah.
makes me crazy.
Well, because it's also a good like those those are some really lovely examples that you gave that round up into my accountability thing, right? Like it and I'm not I want to be mindful of this. Like there are very real, obviously medical
Of
situations and
course,
in
yes.
uh autoimmune diseases and all sorts of stuff, right? And there are things that we have control over every day, right? And I think that's the part that always frustrates me. It's like, it can be this, like you can be experiencing this, all of these things. And also, are you doing things on the other side of it, the things that you do have control over to hold yourself accountable to, in this case, let's say your health and well being, right? So it's like that, it's like that we have a responsibility to ourselves to take care of ourselves. Um, and again, I know there are systems and structures and all of this stuff, like caveat, 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 right? And we still get to show up in our day to day to do the best we can with what we're within our ability, you know?
Yeah, of course. But if
Yeah.
if you're somebody who's constantly complaining that you have certain issues that are triggered by certain things, then
Mhm.
why do you keep doing those things?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
That's the stuff
Yeah.
that makes me nuts. Like,
Yeah.
you're literally your own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to accountability, whether it's somebody like that or somebody who doesn't want to work or somebody,
Yeah.
so it's just yeah, those types of things are the
But
things that light me up.
so like why, and this is where you and I are so similar on this kind of stuff, but like sometimes I do wonder, because holding, ourselves accountable and doing all these things and, yada, yada, that also ends up being a lot of work, right? And it's hard work and it's frustrating sometimes when there's quick fixes for this and do this over here and like, forget about other people and just, go for this. That sometimes it's, a lot harder to take the high road, right?
Yeah.
And the high road in this conversation, I mean, as in like staying true to your values is like being the high road.
And it's so hard to do. Like,
Right.
it's so hard to keep your mouth shut
Totally.
when you just want to light someone up, right?
Yeah. I
You
mean,
just
and
want
do
to
we
be
have to keep
brutally
our mouth
honest.
shut? Just kidding.
Well, hey, that's
No,
that's that's the thing.
like there's I guess I want to get to this question of Wouldn't it be easier if we just like didn't like move with our values or didn't stand in our values? Like, what do you think standing in our values actually means? And when it's hard, how do you keep doing that?
That's a great question, and it is really hard because, um, for me, I'm always super conscientious about, like, not wanting to, like, hurt somebody's feelings, right? Or to say the
Mhm,
wrong thing, um, that's gonna really piss them off. I don't know why I worry so much about that, but I do, and I always have, and so there's been so many times where things have happened that just light me up, and I just kinda
mhm,
let it go, because I don't wanna get into this huge argument that's just gonna make me more frustrated and potentially damage the relationship. But if you really think about it, is the relationship worth even having at that point if you can't, like you said, stand and hold your values true, to who you are? I think sometimes it's a fine line,
mhm,
especially when it comes to family. Like if there's
mhm,
family members who, you're going to be with those family members for your whole life, right?
mhm,
Um, I don't know. I guess I would say that my relationship with my family probably trumps in some instances me being brutally honest at times because I want to preserve the relationship and have a good relationship moving forward rather than to just throw fuel onto the fire and say exactly what I think, knowing that it could potentially damage the relationship forever. So it's a balance. Does
mhm.
that make sense?
Oh, it does, and I so wanna go down that rabbit hole, and I'm not
Let's
sure if it well, because it's like, if a relationship, right? It is it's relating to one another,
Mhm.
and you already you asked the question yourself, right? It's if I don't get to be who I am and say the things that I want without worrying that the relationship is going to crumble or be damaged or be challenged, like, crumbling and damaging and challenging is part of having real relationship with people. Like, it's one thing to show up and like sit there and be silent and do the thing. And I'm not saying that's what you do, but just for like extreme purposes, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And then be like, yeah, I'm here. This is great. Awesome. And then it's like this whatever mirage of like a relationship is that just to keep the peace versus being like, "Oh, hey, no, I get to be a person and this is how I feel and this is really important to me." And I would hope that you, other person who is also in the relationship and also cares about me as a person, have the emotional capacity and understanding and desire to hear what I have to say and to see me for all that I am and to let's talk about this and find the common ground or figure out where like how we can actually still have this relationship even though there's differences, even though there's cracks, even though there's something. And if that's not possible, then like I want to know that too, cuz and I guess it depends on the relationship maybe, but like, I don't know. I like the deep relationships, you know? So if something has to stay surface level and I don't feel like I can express my full self because it's not there, then I don't know that those are relationships that I'm really going to value in my life for the long term, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard. I think it depends on the relationship
Mhm.
and who it is and your life and if that relationship could potentially be damaged and that damaging of that relationship could make things more difficult on other people
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
involved in that relationship. Um, so it's almost like you kind of have to be very careful in the way that you word things and say things because maybe, there's somebody else within that relationship that you love and cherish very much, but you know that it could hurt that person also if you truly said what you wanted to say. Does that make sense? I'm trying to be
I totally know where your brain is at right now, Callie.
Well, that's because you know me.
I get you, girl. I
uh
get it. Okay. So, okay. Do you wanna pivot into the other question that you were gonna ask then? Because I feel like this is also another segue
yeah.
teed up into where I think you were going with the other one.
Yeah, I mean, the question I was gonna ask that you knew that I was gonna ask is like, can you still respect someone if their values are completely different from yours? right?
Yeah.
And that's a big question too, because and it's a hard and it is a hard one because as I mentioned before, my core values is to respect all people and all people's opinions. I think when I get most triggered and most frustrated is when I'm trying to give somebody the floor to talk about what they think about certain issues and certain things. And then they start challenging me and kind of I don't know, insinuating that I'm not smart or I'm not, educated enough to understand their point of view. That's when things kind of go off the rails quickly for me, and then I have a hard time respecting that person because here I am, like, "Hey, let's have a respectful conversation." But if you can't be respectful, then I'm not interested in having that conversation.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so I want to give some context, I think, to listeners. So the topic for the, or the co- we decided to do an episode about this after I don't even remember what episode it was where we ended up getting talking more about the politics of things that are
Mhm.
happening right now.
Mhm.
Oh, and like social media and sharing and showing up and that sort of thing. I don't remember what episode it was, but anyways, and we were talking about how like there's so much going on right now where like these aren't even political conversations. These are moral conversations, right? They're values driven conversations. And so that's what ended up, prompting this episode. Um because it's everywhere right now. And so I
Mhm.
think to your point, Cami, like it depends on the values that we're talking about in terms of like, I think it's, the agree to disagree or, hey, like we can have a difference of opinions or a difference of values and stuff. That's totally fine. If we're talking about the fact that, like, hey, you value freedom and I value, connection and being at home and like close circles, right? Or if I value creativity and you value like financial security, right? Like those are different things. And that's fine. Like we can agree to disagree. Like let's have different approaches to things, whatever. But if we're talking about like the values of treating people as humans, if we're talking about the values of like, hey, we're all here sharing this planet, like nobody's actually in charge. Like some of the values that we're seeing or the lack of values that we're seeing right now, I don't know that there's room to like disagree on those without being like, your moral compass is so different than mine. I don't know how we would actually find common ground. And
Yeah.
those are the ones where I'm like, I don't I like again, connection is a big part of my life and I want to come to a table and I want to have conversations with people and I do genuinely believe that in a lot of situations there is underlying pieces where we do agree. You know what I mean? Where like we could peel back layers and there's probably a lot that we would agree on. But that's not going to be everybody.
Right.
And based on what we're seeing in the world right now, like I hate for everything to be so focused on values and where we stand and what feels aligned. But at the same time, sometimes I wonder if because that hasn't been such a big part of the conversation, if it's gotten to the point that we're at, or has at least been a piece of the getting us to this point where now it's like, oh no, hard stop. Like, I'm not going to go spend my money here at this place anymore because I know very well you don't align with my values. And even if on some level there are values we share, the big ones that matter, we don't right now, And so then I'm going to take a stand where I can with that. Or if
Mhm.
there are people that are very close to me who have had to cut off relationships with people who are very significant in their lives because of a very blatant again, there might be some shared values that are further down the funnel, but like the big values of life and how you operate, those aren't shared. Well, then I don't really care about the smaller ones because the big ones, we're not on the same page. And so I don't know that those are relationships that are going to continue to add value or I'm going to want to continue to put my energy into or continue to build because those are so different, We're operating from a different compass or planet at this point.
So what do you do then if you have somebody in your direct family that is in direct opposition to you on a specific political view, and you cannot see eye to eye no matter what, and you've had multiple challenging conversations with them, and this is your family member, right? So, what do you do?
Um, oof. Okay.
I think a lot of families are dealing with this right now,
Yeah, and
you know?
I'm gonna this is probably gonna sound harsh, honestly. I don't believe that just because we are related by blood or any marriage or ancestral lineage or anything means that we have to choose to have a relationship. I think that we get to choose who we want to have relationships with because again, relationships will require connection, they require energy, they require two they're two ways, right? Um and I don't think that just because we were born into situations, and so I'm just going to take the example of like immediate family. Just because we're born into situations where we're related by blood, that it means that we have to all of a sudden like put on faces and agree and whatnot. If they're so, again, if these big values and morals are so different, then there's part of me that's like, I don't actually want to be associated with that. You know what I
Mm.
mean? But I again, it's there's so much nuance and there's so much gray. I think it depends on the values and I think it depends on the relationship, right? Like there are some, extended family members where it's like, hey, yeah, your heart is good and also you're acting and I say your heart is good based on what I know and but you're acting in a way and you're voting in a way and you're standing up for things that are so far removed from that. But because you're also like not a daily part of my life and whatnot, like it's not a big deal for me to, not really be engaged in a relationship there. Um, I think that
What
when
if
they're
what
closer
y
relationships and like
yeah.
immediate family and inner circle, I think that's a big opportunity where people have to really think like, if I don't have these people in my life, what is that gonna look like?
Yeah.
What is the rest of my circle look like? Am I willing to put up with this stuff, even though I know it's against my values, because there's something about the relationship that I don't want to part ways with or let go of or all this meaning like it's a big moment for reflection, but I think people in those situations owe it to themselves to sit with a lot of that stuff. And
Mhm.
maybe it is finding like this is also where I think professional help and having therapy and having people that you can talk with and because it's not easy to just like cut a family member off, right?
Mhm.
It's but is losing your own inner peace, losing a part of yourself to maintain a relationship that might be, toxic, might be, um, like if it's an unhealthy dynamic and if it causes more stress and causes more angst and does something than benefits, and that the benefit is just because there's like history or because there's, a tie because we're born into the same family, I think it's opportunities to reflect because I don't think that we should sabotage ourselves. Um, for other people. If they're willing to work through it and talk and be open-minded and think and like that's awesome, right? And so that's where like if people are willing to have those conversations, let's do it and let's see if we can find this common ground. And if you say these are my values and I'm really concerned about this because it doesn't seem like these are your like and you can have those conversations, that's great. But if you can't, then I think it's like a moment of, what does this actually mean then? I don't know. What about you? What do you think?
I think it's a really, really hard, thing that a lot of people are experiencing right now, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it's almost like you have to figure out, where your boundaries are,
Mhm.
and then you have to really kind of decipher and discern whether somebody is acting out of judgment or whether they are just so passionate about their beliefs, because I think that you can misconstrue one for another, right?
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
think that when somebody's very passionate about the way they feel about things, sometimes they, especially in they're in a heated conversation with somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily agree with their stance, sometimes it can come across as somebody attacking you.
Mhm.
And you can immediately feel defensive. I know that's happened to me in a lot of instances where I've been having a conversation with a close family member, and um, maybe I stand up and don't necessarily agree with something. And what comes back at me is, well, you're just, you're not paying attention. You're not very, you need to educate yourself. That's the kind of stuff that just lights me up
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's disrespect.
Mhm.
How dare you, assume that I'm not educated, assume that I'm not, up on things.
Mhm.
And I think that's happening in a lot of conversations right now because there is so much division and
Mhm.
polarity out there, right?
Mhm.
Between the right and the left. And all we're all passionate about the way that we feel about different things. And so sometimes it's very difficult to have conversations with people, friends, family, close family, and find a common ground. I think
Mhm.
it's becoming more difficult. Um,
Because we're not taught how to actually communicate, right? We're
right,
not taught how like, it's what the thing that you're taught about communication is, "Hey, if you're in middle school or high school, do you wanna join the debate team so that you can learn how to debate?" When in reality, it's like, we're not taught how to just communicate, how to ask questions, how to show up in
right.
some sort of, and I think a lot of it has to do with emotional intelligence too. Because
Yes.
if you get triggered and then you're showing up in a conversation and you're already pissed and you're triggered and you're frustrated and whatever else, that conversation is going to look a lot different than if you're coming into a conversation being like, you know what? I'm ready to learn. I want to sit and talk this out. I want to hear, I genuinely want to hear what you have to say. I want to listen with an open ear and like see what we can do and see if maybe we still can't come to an agreement, but I'm going to approach it in a way and check myself as we're talking about this stuff so that I'm not reacting, but responding to the conversation we're having. But we're not taught that. And there's a lot of people who don't, wouldn't, even if they were taught, probably wouldn't follow it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And it's so hard sometimes to stop yourself
Excuse me.
when
Oh,
you're
yeah.
feeling triggered and you are instantly pissed about somebody,
Mhm.
something somebody said.
Mhm.
Um, I have a really hard time. One of my toxic traits is sometimes I know I get this from my mom because she was the same way, is sometimes I will immediately, if I'm really pissed about something or somebody has offended me and I'm feeling defensive, my immediate response is to attack them back and to go for something that's really going to hurt them. Like I don't I play really nasty. I know this is, and this is something I've been working on for a long time because it's taken me a long time to recognize that in myself and to have I guess the wherewithal to just stop, take a
Mhm.
breath, take a step back, and then just walk away from the conversation like, "You know what? Something that you just said has me really frustrated and triggered. So I am not gonna have this conversation right now. I'm gonna take a minute, and I think we both need to cool down, and I think that we can come back and have like, a reasonable conversation where we're respectful, but right now, I'm not at that place."
See, okay, and okay, well, first of all, I'm gonna be on the lookout for that, Cammy.
Watch out.
I feel pretty fortunate where, like, no, I shouldn't say that. Like, there's definitely times where I feel like whether it's working together, whatnot, where I'm like, oh, I can tell like Cammy's like ready to
Fired up.
pounce. You know what I mean?
Mhm, yeah.
But no, what I was gonna say is like the tricky part is those feelings are valid, right? Like
Yeah.
feeling frustrated, like we want to feel those things, but we don't want them to be ammunition for the conversation, right?
Right.
So it's like, hey,
Yes.
I'm not saying like when you get pissed, don't be pissed, right? Or when you're not feeling full of rage that you could punch something or yeah. I've been having some very angry dreams lately to the point where Mark was like, is there something you're not telling me you're talking about? I'm like, throwing shit in my dreams and like yelling. Yeah, it's wild. But it's like, it's important to feel that stuff, but it's just also like, it's not going to serve the conversation if the goal of the conversation is actually to come up with either some sort of resolution and or at least hearing where people are at. You know what I mean? Not that
Mhm.
everything has to revolve around resolution, but like at least hearing people out. If again, you're approaching it from both sides being like, I genuinely want to learn and understand and try to figure this out.
Yeah, it all comes down, like you said, to the communication,
Mhm.
right? That we were not taught to do.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of our problem right now as a society is that everybody's got all these big feelings about all
Mhm.
these issues. And the problem is the communication is terrible. Like we just instead of having the conversations and coming together, we're attacking. It's one person attacking the other side and then they get mad and then they attack and then they attack and it's just this back and forth and we're just making the problem worse. We're not making it better.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think part of the reality is that humans in our lives are not having the conversations. We're not doing the research. We're getting the nuggets, we're getting the sound bites from machines and bots that are literally programmed to make it as divisive as possible.
Sure.
So if
Yeah.
that's the only and so like obviously we're talking about the I don't even want to use the word politics at this point. I'm just going to use the like moral dilemma that we're in right now, right? Because it is very much morals a moral dilemma.
Yeah.
Um
Yes, I agree.
the you have these systems in place to divide that then it again it's like if people aren't actually sitting and having conversations with one another and aren't trying to find their own information and doing all these other things, it's no wonder that people don't know how to also communicate because they see a headline and they think that that's the story and then that they're stuck on it when they don't realize. And maybe you and I come to it from a different background too, because we've been in media where it's
Mhm.
like that they're trying to get your attention. They're trying to invoke
Mhm.
a response. They're trying to make it, do the thing that it is exactly doing. It's working. So unless you're going to be like, hey, what's the rest of the story? How does this really look? And I'm going to have questions with people in real life or have conversations with people in real life. Like we're just going to keep doing ourselves a disservice if all we're doing is like taking shit on social media and resharing it, thinking that that's truth.
Well, that's such a great point too, because I think that there is such misinformation out
Oh,
there.
totally.
And for those people who are listening who don't understand how social media works, let me just give you a quick crash course here. Anytime you click on an article to read that article, regardless of what side you're on, it's automatically going to feed your like stories into your algorithm. So you're going to start seeing more of those types of things and more of those types of stories. So if you're reading a story about um an issue that you feel very strongly about from your perspective, you're going to get more and more and more and more of those types of stories regardless if they're true or not, right? Um and I
It's called
think
the echo chamber.
yeah, and it's hard and it becomes so hard to decipher because I have during all of the news that's been out about the Epstein files and things that are happening with that. I've read articles of, or I've watched videos from both the Democratic and Republic, from the Senate and the Republican Party, just different perspectives because I want to see both sides of things, but if I lean one way, all of a sudden I'm getting news feed after news feed after news feed of articles that are more leaning to that side. Um, and so what happens is it starts to make me question like whether or not my perspective is based in accuracy. Like, am I even reading the right stuff? Am I understanding this correctly? Am I like what? Like, I'm reading so many different things. I hope I'm understanding this because I sure feel passionate about it and I sure feel a certain way. But is my way like, am I even reading the truth? And I think that's a whole nother thing, a whole nother issue that is facing a lot of people right now is there's just a lot of crap out there that isn't even based in facts. And it's so hard to find the facts.
Well, I think all that also rolls up to, I mean, all I'm going to say is this. I don't need to see any more facts about anything going on with those files to think anything differently than I already do. And the
Mm.
fact that there is literally one person being held accountable for all of this, and it is a woman in the United States, she should be. And also the fact that there are literally zero men being held accountable for this stuff, monsters, like yeah, that those are the only facts that I need at this point, right? Like, there's no other facts that people are going to be able
Yeah.
to show me or share, or I don't care whatever side it's on. It's people at this point that are so far. Yeah. Anyways, there's no side as far as I'm concerned with that sort of thing, unless you're just literally on the wrong monstrous side.
You're either
But
on the human side or you're not, right?
yeah, seriously. But what I was going to say is, like, that all, I think part of the reason that people don't tend to branch out from different things, right? From their news chambers, from the sources, from the people, is because of the trust that we put in others based on our moral compass, based on our values, right? To bring it back to that, which is what we started this whole conversation talking about, it's like, if I feel like I can trust somebody who is aligned with who I think is aligned with my morals and values, then why would I second guess what they're saying if in all these other situations, maybe they've led me down the right path or that we've agreed or whatnot. And so I think that's where we get into these situations where it's really hard to step out of it, because, like, this is what we've been following. We align with that stuff, or at least we have at one point. So now we can't jump ship. Now we can't go and try and find more information. But it's in those moments where it's actually like, no, that's when we need to question ourselves, right? Question our moral compass, and does this actually resonate or not? I remember having a conversation a couple years ago with someone who, it was before the 2024 elections, and like early on, because I think Biden was still even in the race at that point. And this person, I know what their voting history had been, and I know where a lot of their moral compass stood, but I also know where, like, there's a lot that shared in common, And I remember having a conversation where it's like, oh, they didn't like either candidate. And I asked, but does one support your morals and your values that you hold closest? Does one support those over the other? And then it was like, oh, light bulb where it's like,
Mhm.
gosh, well, I've never really thought about it that way, because in the political sphere, at least up until this last election, when politics could still be considered semi normal, whatever that means, it was like, you didn't have to think about your values as much. You didn't have to think about your morals as much in those situations, because you just kind of fell in line with, oh, I know this is kind of where things go, and I know this is how it happens, and I know this is what I could expect, and or just all politics or immoral or whatever. But again, to your, like, now we're having to have so many more of these conversations because it's gone so far astray.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, I
So
don't know.
so what would you tell somebody who is trying to, I guess, they're trying to navigate through everything that's happening right now. We've got an election coming up this fall, and now more than ever, it's so important people get out and vote. And I don't want this whole, to be politically focused either, but that is a big part of what is fueling a lot of this conversation, right? What would you be your advice to somebody who is questioning kind of everything at this point, questioning what they're reading, questioning what's going on in the world? Um, what would be your advice to them in the best way to go about voting, choosing a candidate that works for them, or even having conversations with other people that might not align with, how they're feeling and what their core values are?
Well, first and foremost, I'm never going to tell anybody how to vote or what to do or research candidates or anything like that. Like, I am not a political correspondent. I
Yeah,
don't, like, that is on everyone's individual. That is the
sure. Yeah,
civic responsibility and accountability we have to the decisions we made with the people who, oversee our spot.
sure.
That's
Yeah.
something everybody has to do. However, I think the start, like, let's pull it in a lot closer than that, right? Like, if sitting down, literally sit down with a piece of paper and write out the things that are most important to you in life. And you don't need to tie them up into a nice little values bow or anything like that. Just write down the situations or the experiences or the things that are most important to your life as you go carry on through your day to day. And then maybe layer on another piece of paper that's like, what are things that really piss you off, that really frustrate you, that really get you going, that really create a reaction, like a strong response, a strong reaction. And like, then look at those things and start thinking like, what do these all have in common? Is there a common thread, or are there a couple common threads that you'd tie up into a general, like, okay, maybe these are actually my values to start with, right? Because once you have, and this goes back to something I said earlier, like, I don't think we can have 12 different values, because then when it comes to making decisions about life, you've got all sorts of different places to look. If you have like one or two, maybe three, but really like one or two core values, when it comes to making decisions based on whether you're voting, based on whether you're getting a job, based on a relationship, based on anything else, you have those things to fall back on. And it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier to say, hey, if I'm looking to, buy something from this company and I know that my values are, connection and accountability, what is that? How does that company align with those? Are they accountable to XYZ? Do they foster connection in XYZ ways? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to have an understanding of your values first. And again, one or two that you can quick gut check then against, like, hey, if this is my value, if this is a big piece of how I am, how I operate, who I am, then like that's going to help me make a decision about XYZ a lot simpler than, you know, everything else. And I'm not saying there's going to be nuance to every decision, but I think having that strong foundation of, here are the top values I have, allows you to make those decisions easier, but you have to understand what those values are first. And I think narrowing it down is, really important.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that's a really good uh perspective and way to look at it, because I think part of the problem is that people don't take the time to really understand why their values are their values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why they feel the way that they do about certain things. Some of them have just been learned over a lifetime and they're just going with them because that's what they've been told to do and conditioned to
Right.
do.
Right.
So, taking the time to really discover
Yeah.
what's important to you and then making your moves from there, I think would would benefit a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Because I think that's where, yeah, you'd probably see a lot more in common
I think
than,
so too. I think
yeah.
when it comes right down to it, people would probably agree so much more
Yeah.
with each
Not
other.
always. There are
Not
monsters out
always.
there. We know.
True.
But like,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
anywho,
Well, that was a fun episode, huh?
we want to know your thoughts though, everybody. Seriously, like, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing on social or whatever, um, you can always, like, we can leave our email in the show notes and stuff too, because I'm just curious what other people are experiencing and navigating, and what your thoughts are on values, and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really, they're important conversations to be having. And I also know that not everybody can have the conversation, or wants to have the conversation, or has the right network to have the conversation. And I'm not saying we're going to be the network for everybody to have the conversation, but hopefully it's at least starting to, like, reassure people that these conversations are happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And not to be afraid of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think a lot of people are afraid to have those conversations right now.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
love it.
All
Well,
right.
thank you everybody. I think hopefully there was some good stuff that you can pull out of this episode, and if you feel like this episode resonates with you or might be something that you want a friend or family member to listen to, please share, like, subscribe, all of the things. We love all of that. And just want to say thank you for continuing to listen to our show and support our show. And I think that's all I have. Becca, you got any last words of wisdom?
Nope. That's a wrap.
All
We'll see you
right.
guys later.
All right. See you guys.